Some of the guides I've made could be put into question. Akshan support, while the player we analyzed has a 60% win rate, can be difficult for just anyone to pilot. Twisted Fate support, kinda sus. But Riot themselves has gifted us Blitzcrank Jungle with their recent off-meta buffs. Blitz now gets even more attack speed from his W, and it also does bonus damage on hit to both champions and jungle minions. They made his E scale with AP, and also do more damage against jungle camps, and they also increase the AP scaling on his ult passive and uncap the amount of times it can hit a single target. Yeah, I'd be doing the Macarena too, Blitz. Everyone and their sister has been playing Blitzcrank Jungle, but most of those people have main character syndrome, taking keystones like Lethal Tempo or Hail of Blades and building damage items like Gnasher's Tooth. If you're one of those people, I'm gonna burst your bubble and tell you that those other YouTubers smurfing in silver with full damage builds taught you wrong. But I found someone who taught me a better way to do it. The player we're analyzing today is known as I Am Keys, a semi-pro jungler on the EU West server who has peaked at over 1000 LP Challenger and made it to Challenger several times since he first started playing League in Season 1. This pro has put his own spin on Blitzcrank Jungle and has been playing him on a secret account to some wild success, not only currently holding a 61% win rate, but also holding over a 5.0 KDA since picking him up. He's still grinding Blitz Jungle and still climbing higher and higher to this day. Before you can start doing the robot over your enemy's corpses, we first have to talk about some of the shortcomings Blitz has as a jungler. For one, Blitz Jungle has a vulnerable level 1, making him prone to invades. Blitz, while being better now, is still slow at clearing camps that have multiple minions. While he has a strong mid and early game, as the game progresses, he will fall off. And finally, and most importantly, Blitz loves collecting instruments, but no matter how hard he tries, he can't find himself any organs. That's not what I meant. Never mind, keep going. But even with all of these potential problems, Keys has found a way to make it work. When the game starts, you have to realize you're not a typical Blitzcrank. You're not going to go fishing for hooks level 1 because you're not going to level that ability. You're going to take your W or overdrive to assist in clearing. Keys, like most junglers, will start on a buff, typically blue, and hope for a solid leash from his laners. If he gets one, he'll be able to save Smite to accelerate taking Gromp next. At level 2, he'll also take his E or Power Fist. It's important when clearing camps to use this ability while your W is active because it will also apply the bonus damage from W. It's also important to note that this is an auto attack reset, so make sure you finish an auto attack and then immediately press E to speed up your clears even more. Once Gromp is secured, he'll use the Blast Plant to help him move a bit quicker on his way to red buff, which after taking he should be level 3 and have all of his basic abilities. At this point, Keys told me he's basically done with his early game jungling. You're now going to turn into a roaming support that is going to make the enemy laners' lives hell with constant ganks. The next camp Keys is going to look to take is Scuttle Crab, so he has some time to burn before needing to go there. Depending on the side he started on and the wave state of his laners, he'll look to gank a vulnerable lane. What is a vulnerable wave state? I'm glad you asked. If Keys sees that an enemy laner or laners is trying to crash their wave into the turret or has a slow push moving them towards his ally's turret, that sets off a light bulb in his head to head down there as they're going to be pushed deep into the lane soon. More often than not, even at these early levels, this works phenomenally for him. And beyond using those big brain strategies, Blitzcrank by himself is also one of the strongest ganking junglers out of the whole cast. It's about how he approaches the gank. Thanks to the enemies being pushed into the turret with their wave state, this means Keys can normally get behind them. He doesn't lead a gank with his hook unless absolutely necessary. Instead, he prefers to use his W to speed boost his way behind his target and land a foolproof knockup on his target and start his onslaught of auto attacks. If the enemy has flash or some sort of movement ability, then, and only then, will he finally hook that opponent back into his allied laner or laners to finish the job. If he knows his target doesn't have flash, instead of holding his Q for an escape, he will instead still knock the opponent up first and then stack his hook CC with the knockup CC to keep the enemy in place for about 2 seconds, more than enough time to net a takedown. There are some times where he will need to lead with his hook though, if someone is out of range or he can't flank behind them. In this example, Nasus Synergies uses Wither on him, which slows him down too much to get in range to land the knockup, so he is forced to use his hook to catch him and finish the job instead. The majority of the time though, you should be trying to land your knockup first to ensure more successful ganks. After finding that successful gank, he'll typically rotate to Scuttle to secure that for his team, and once again, depending on lane states, either look for an additional gank or head back to base to grab his first item. Most importantly, Keys wants to purchase his boots. If he has enough money, he'll also rush for his level 2 boots, normally grabbing Swifties in most cases or Merc Treads against CC heavy teams. Purchasing boots unlocks his Predator Keystone, which will make his next ganks even easier. His room page is catered specifically to let him get in range for ganks and traverse the map as fast as possible. Alongside Predator, he also takes Water Walking and Celerity for significant speed to help him get off ganks like this. You may have already noticed, but his main objective with this build is to gank as much as possible. You're almost like one of those constant roaming top laners that never stay in lane, but instead of having an enemy top laner to call out when you're missing, you're a jungler, so it's even easier to get these ganks off. You'll do typical jungler things like abusing lanes that don't bring flash, like this cocky Camille who thought she could get away by just using her E, or after one successful gank, constantly re-ganking the same lane that doesn't have flash anymore, like this poor Heimerdinger who felt the abuse of jungle blitzcrank multiple times in the first 10 minutes. If an enemy you're ganking is further back in the lane though, they'll more than likely try to hide behind a minion to avoid potentially getting hooked. You can outplay them like Keys by positioning yourself between them and the minion, and if you have smite up, smiting that minion while your hook is on the way to catch them off guard. Can be kind of tricky, but it is extremely nasty when pulled off. The enemy jungler, once seeing this constant ganking strategy, will normally react by trying to counter jungle him, but little does that jungler know that he has already counter jungled himself. That's right, Keys, while having downtime between his ganks, will actively sabotage his own Wraith, Wolves, and Krugs camp so that they won't respawn, only taking the biggest monster from each of those camps, which is worth the most EXP and gold, so that way if the enemy jungler does try to invade him, they just find half the camp for basically no EXP or gold for themselves.
What the f is this piece of
Blitzcrank, being a support champion at heart, can function very well with low income, but most of these other junglers cannot. So while he's helping his other lanes, the enemy jungler is starving to try to make something out of it. But it's not only his camps he counter jungles, it's also the enemy junglers' camps too. In the early game with Smite Up, Blitz can hook minor camps over the wall from a safe position and steal that camp, or part of that camp, before the jungle timer resets. Later in the game, this opportunity extends to red or blue buff camps as well. Watch in this one game how Key stole 3 of the enemy red buffs in a row, completely negating any EXP or gold the enemy could have gotten from red over this 15-minute window.
You can't keep getting away with it!
This strategy works with Gromp, it works with Wraiths, it works with everything really. By preventing the enemy from taking their camps or his, he is effectively bringing that enemy jungler down to his income level or worse, which again is fine for Blitzcrank but devastating for other standard junglers. Watch this disgusting clip where Key steals the enemy big Wraith, then heads to top and kill the Camille that has no flash with his Aatrox. He then goes and smites and steals the red buff from Shaco, realizes that Shaco may attempt to go bot side for Scuttle Crab, and once again steals that from him, and then finally finishes it off right after that by ganking bot with Predator and netting 3 kills with his team. That is Blitzcrank Jungle in a nutshell. Clearing camps and securing objectives gets even easier as the game progresses, and Blitzcrank gets his ultimate or static field. When Riot uncapped the amount of times Blitz's ultimate passive could proc on one enemy, they effectively made him an even stronger single target clear machine. Blitz can clear early dragons and Rift Heralds at similar rates to other popular junglers while taking minimal damage. Not only is he great at taking objectives, but he's also great at skirmishing thanks to this buff as well. Early and mid game, if Keys is able to catch an enemy for a 1v1, he can normally win thanks to this buff. Opponents will regularly underestimate him and his ability to stick onto them, so if a Kayn gets cocky and tries to steal his red buff, you can bet he's going to tag them back, and you don't even want to know what he can do to ADCs. The active portion of his ultimate is mostly going to be used at the end of a fight for extra burst or to catch an enemy off guard, or to help burst down an objective like Dragon to win a 50-50 smite. You'd think because this build doesn't prioritize damage items like Nashor's Tooth or Triforce, that would prevent him from being able to clear camps quickly or net solo kill. Instead of those squishy damage items, Keystone prioritizes Turbo Chem Tank and Dead Man's Plate as his 2 core items. Both of these items allow him to wind up a massive auto attack that can do some devastating damage to both jungle camps or enemies. I mean, watch him just completely squash this Scuttle Crab later in the game without smite, and now watch him squash this Scuttle Crab later in the game with smite. Yeah. As the game progresses, your damage from these items and your skirmish ability will fall off though, so you'll essentially fall into the typical role of a Blitzcrank support. You'll want to use vision and hiding in fog of war to catch unsuspecting enemies with your team, or yoinking them from over a wall for your team to completely decimate them. Also, depending on where you are within the game, that is going to change how you teamfight with Blitz Jungle. In all cases, you'll still be looking to land that juicy hook on a squishy enemy to try to turn the teamfight into a 4v5 as fast as possible. But in the early and mid game, you'll really be able to get in the middle of the team fight and scrap, both soaking up damage with your tankiness and being a damage threat with your potent buffed abilities. As the game gets deeper, it will be harder for you to be a threat aside from your hook, so you will still want to get in the middle of the fight because of how tanky you are. But instead of always trying to land that juicy hook when your team is fighting front to back, you can instead use your abilities to help peel a diver away from your backline like this silly Camille. You're still going to need to land your hooks to win games, but if you can, the enemy team will feel like they have no openings. For his build, he starts every game with an Ember Knife and a refillable potion. From there, he rushes his level 2 boots, almost always buying Boots of Swiftness, but sometimes purchasing Merc Treads against heavy CC teams. He'll then rush for his first core item in his mythic Turbo Chem Tank. Next, he'll buy his second core item, a Dead Man's Plate. His 4th, 5th, and 6th items will be flex items depending on the enemy team, most commonly buying support items like Knight's Vow, Zeke's Convergence, or even a Mikhail's Blessing. He could potentially go for tankier purchases as well, depending on what he needs, like a Randuin's Omen, Abyssal Mask, or Anathema's Chains. If the game goes long or he needs some more oomph in his build, he'll buy an Elixir of Iron, and like every good jungler does, he's buying control wards throughout the game. For his runes, he runs Predator for more movement speed, Cheap Shot for more damage during his CC, Eyeball Collection for some scaling, and Ingenious Hunter since it synergizes so well with both Predator and Turbo Chem Tank. He also brings Celerity for even more movement speed, and Water Walking for the same. For his flex runes, he takes 1 attack speed, 1 adaptive force, and scaling health. Blitzcrank Jungle works well with hard engage champions like Nautilus or Leona, or champs with easy engage abilities like Ashe or Malphite. Blitzcrank Jungle struggles against aggressive early game junglers like Nidalee or Elise, or junglers that can mitigate his CC and outduel him like Olaf or Nocturne. If you guys like this analysis video, you'll definitely like our last one, which was on how to play Pantheon support. See you guys next time. Peace.